Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And this week, I'm joined by one of our new SiftPop writers, Matt. So, welcome to the show, Matt.
Hello, hello.
So, we're going to be talking about one of Kubrick's most disturbing films, to say the least, and actually, for me, my favorite horror movies. So I am very excited to talk about The Shining today. But before we get there, we're going to start off with our coming attractions section, which, speaking of horror movies, so Matt, what film are you most excited about coming out this week?
Oh my gosh. Can we start already? Together. I have to get my notes because I'm a child, but
that is okay.
But together. So living in the pandemic, I know living in the pandemic, we're all just like assuming that these films are going to come through non-stop. There is about to be a whole flurry of these.
Yep.
But the first one that's coming up to us has James McAvoy. So that already gives it a stronghold. And I would argue it might be the bench poll for what comes next.
Absolutely. And like, I'm a huge fan of James McAvoy and Sharon Horgan as well, too. I've seen her in a few things, and I actually got a chance to screen this, and like obviously this is coming out this week and I can talk about it a little bit. But like this is like a great acting movie. Like it's basically that camera's on the two of them interacting with each other, interacting with the audience. It's basically a play, more or less.
Yes, exactly.
And they are so great in it. And like there's some narrative things and I think some restrictions in terms and limits with what they're trying to do with it, but like it's emotional. The acting is great. There's a couple of moments where it gets a little on the nose and preachy about like the pandemic and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like
which I mean, I think that's going to be part of. We're about to see an influx of all of that happening over and over again and beating us over the head. I think we're going to be tired of it very quickly.
Because like we got that what was that? Lockdown or whatever. That came out on HBO Max. They had one was like a thriller about the pandemic, and I'm like, this is a little too soon. Like I can understand something like this where it's like a drama and dealing with it, and we can all relate to that. But like turning into like this action thriller, I'm just like, okay, I think we're running here when we should be walking a little bit. But I definitely would recommend checking out Together. It's especially if you like you appreciate some great acting and very human story. It's like that's really what it is. It's you there with the two of you for 90 minutes and definitely worth your time.
The vibe I got from the trailers was Marriage Story mixed with pandemic, which are two very different things, but also very realistic things.
I cannot imagine the characters in Marriage Story being cooped up with each other.
Yes, just ScarJo just throwing things to the wall.
And I think Adam Driver would be punching out some more walls.
But Sharon Horgan, she is amazing. She's also done voice work on Bob's Burgers. If for anybody who is a fan of that, that is enough that you should go listen.
Oh yeah, and like I remember her popping up in she was in Game Night. And
she was in Game Night. She is the guest of Ryan on the second Game Night.
Yep. Billy Magnuson.
She is smarter than everybody else.
Yep. Yes, especially him. Like she's so much smarter than her date. And they make such a fun pair in that film too. But yeah, so like
she plays it well. Like she is just a joy to watch. Any chance to watch her, absolutely go do it.
Absolutely. So honestly, y'all should go check out Together, and not to be mistaken with another 2021 film called Together. So
yeah, which by the way, when I Google, I was like, oh no, these are
very different films. Also a good one. So Ed Helms, I would definitely recommend that too. Now for something completely different. Our main release from this week, which was definitely my pick, and honestly, pretty sure it was Matt's pick too, originally, is Candyman. Now, I have never seen any of the Candyman films, but the second I saw the monkey paw logo pop up and saw produced by Jordan Peele, and then watch that trailer, I'm like, this looks terrifying. And it's so stylized and has such a haunting and eerie vibe to it. And it grabbed my attention. I'm like, you know what? I'm excited for this movie. I hope it scares me because that means it's good. And I'm sure it will because this trailer does. So
yeah, no, it seems so the best way to describe it is like terrifying. Like they are going for it in the scenes and the way everything is set up. Like they know what's going on. They know how to push your buttons. And they're going to go for it.
Yeah, because I'm looking at director Nia DaCosta, which I did see Little Woods that she had directed, which I thought was a good film. And then her next film after this is the Captain Marvel sequel, which is interesting.
A little bit of a jump.
Which it's very interesting taking a look at this, that she's jumping from Candyman to that. But I don't know, based off that trailer, this looks crazy. And I'm ready for the ride. So, and basically this is the one main wide release this weekend. So we'll see how it does.
I think it's gonna do very strongly, actually. I will be surprised if it doesn't just blow up.
The big thing is at this situation, I don't know how many films strictly like made for adults are really killing it at the box office. Because like Free Guy is the #1 movie out right now, and that's just like a fun time. And it's funny, and like this definitely had a better, I think, marketing campaign than Reminiscence, which completely bombed this past weekend, which was geared towards adults. Because it'll be interesting to see if all those horror fans go out and check this out. Quiet Place 2, I think a decent amount of people went to go see that and did pretty well for itself. So yeah, I'm rooting for Candyman here. See how it does.
I think it's going to be I think you're going to have a lot of people that are just like feeling the nostalgia of the original, and they're going to come out in force.
Here's the hope.
Hopefully safely.
Yes, hopefully safely. That's the most important thing. Add that onto like anything at this point.
Yeah.
But there's our coming attractions for the week. Are you ready to talk about The Shining?
I don't know if anyone is ever ready to talk about The Shining because there's so much freaking crap to unpack from this.
So, Matt, what are your like main feelings about the film?
Unnerving. So as an unsupervised child around age 12 or 11, I was allowed to watch this.
Oh my.
Which probably should not have happened. But it was so unnerving and there were so many things I didn't understand about it. So I took everything from the perspective of young Danny. Then rewatching it as an adult, I took everything from the perspective of Jack and Wendy. So those are very different perspectives. And it's so funny, like dichotomy that happens between those. Because as a young Jack, I'm just like, oh, I'm having a lot of fun. I have magic. But then as an adult, I'm like, oh no, you have mental trauma and we need to address this.
Yeah, it's I appreciate the first thing that came out of your mouth was unnerving, because boy does Kubrick know how to create atmosphere in this film.
Yes.
Because between the long dolly shots, the steady cam shots of just rolling around this weird hotel on that little tricycle that Danny's riding around, the music is so creepy.
And have read my mind already.
It's like, it just like gets under your skin. And it's like the hold on, and like at the beginning throughout the credits, and then the crazy, like unnerving rattling music that pops in when like anything crazy happens. Right. And it's how he decided to have music like that in this film was so inspired, because everything, and like the colors, like the famous carpet, the creepy sets, and like it feels like the hotel's like out of time, and like those moments where like Jack's going through time and seeing like the old hotel. And probably my favorite scene in the whole movie is when Grady like spills stuff on Jack and they go into the bathroom, and boy is that bathroom like arresting with like the bright red, and the interactions that they have. And not gonna lie, I've quoted this to mess with people before, where he's just like, but you've always been here, Mr. Torrance. Always been here. And like the actor that plays Grady, who's popped up in a couple other Kubrick films, is so perfect in that scene.
Yes.
And the way he delivers that interaction with Jack, and that's the real crux of the film, because that's the turning point between like Jack is just having a lot of tension with his family, and like now he's going to do something evil.
Yeah.
And messed up. And that's the way that Grady like pushes him in that direction, because right after that, we get Wendy finding the typewriter, and all work and no play makes Jack a dull.
That is one of the most terrifying scenes to me, is watching her go through each page over and over and knowing what it is. You know it's going to be the same thing over and over, but it still breaks you each page turn, and then it's just shattered.
What's crazy is that Kubrick actually got his interns to type out all of those pages. And like, you have to think about this. This was like the late 70s into 1980. They didn't have like copy and paste. Like, they typed out all those pages.
They didn't get to Control V, Control P, that stuff.
Nope. And that is so creepy. And how they're all in different shapes and paragraph structures and all.
Yeah, that is also very disarming, is like everything is like different. It's like I'm writing a paragraph, but like, so it almost mirrors like his mindset of, I think I'm writing a story, but I'm doing the same thing over and over again, but I'm going to format it like it's the same. And that is the most terrifying part to me, is that like in his mindset, it's real.
Yeah. And the confrontation that they have there, and the fact that Kubrick, like by reputation, in that scene had them do over 100 takes.
Holy crap.
Of Jack Nicholson yelling at Shelley Duvall up those stairs. And the whole thing is like, you didn't let me finish. And Jack Nicholson was born to play Jack Torrance in this movie.
Right.
Like exactly what Kubrick wanted out of this role, that is Jack Nicholson. And honestly, that's why Stephen King hated it. Because he's just like, Jack Torrance is supposed to be like a regular guy who goes through this descent. You know from the start that Jack Torrance looks not right from the beginning of this film.
Yeah, which is interesting because, all right, so honestly, I'm only about halfway through the book, but I've read like I said, halfway through. So I know a little bit about like what Jack is supposed to start with, and it's very different. But it's very interesting to see the dichotomy between the way that Kubrick shot it versus what the original source material is.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about Kubrick too, because he had adapted a lot of books. Lolita, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, this. And he seems to be more of like, I'll take this idea and do whatever the hell I want with it.
Right.
And because like,
and that that definitely comes across if you, I mean, just being halfway through the book, you see exactly how that comes across.
Yeah, and I don't blame Stephen King for not liking this adaptation because like it's not a strong adaptation of his work. It is a complete reimagining of his story and his idea in the most unnerving, symmetrical, creepy, just everything about it is about the atmosphere, and Jack Nicholson's performance is all about that too. Because my God,
it's terrifying.
Like the whole is like Daddy, and like when he's just like going straight, completely lost it, and those like guttural screams like Daddy boy, and it's just like, oh no, this is creepy. And
yeah, when he's looking for him while Danny is sliding around, there is nothing but terror.
Yep. And the poor Dick Halloran,
who gets the worst end of the stick ever, and by that I mean the axe end.
But yes, which
spoilers.
Yeah, well, haven't watched The Shining yet. You probably shouldn't be sitting here listening to us talk about it in depth. Go watch it first, then come back. But after all of that, and I love Scatman Crothers in this movie, and that is one of the most effective jump scares I have ever seen in a movie.
Well, it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and like I even imagine how unexpected it would have been if it wasn't for Jack Nicholson yelling.
Yeah, like that guttural yell right before you slam the axe. You're just like, oh shit.
Yep. Because like, can you imagine if he didn't do that and it was just out of nowhere? But like, it's creepier because that scream is creepy.
Yes.
And the editing in this movie is impeccable because when that axe hits and it cuts to Danny screaming because has that connection through the shine. And then
yes, watching him like react to the death is brutal.
Yeah.
And like you feel for him in that moment because all he is doing is reacting, but you know that he's feeling it. And that is so hard. And that was such a greatly like done shot, great reaction. Like everything about that was perfect to make you feel like, by the way, this is happening.
Yes. And then the worst part is that perfectly framed shot of Jack Nicholson's head creeping up and him just like,
yes,
that look is terrifying. And I can't imagine, like, I can imagine other actors playing the character of Jack Torrance from the book. And like, that would be a very interesting thing to see. But like this Jack Torrance, it's really hard for me to imagine many actors being able to accomplish the terror that Jack Nicholson plays off in this movie.
Yeah.
And the way he looks, that stare. And you know the whole part where he's like bash it and like going back to the editing.
I'm just gonna bash our brains in a lot. Yeah, that's brutally terrifying and will send chills on your spine no matter who you are.
And kudos to that kid who played Danny and the whole like red rum and like that moment of when Wendy sees murder in the reflection and then the music starts playing and then the axe hits into the door for the first time and you're just like, well, this is gonna end badly.
Yep.
And just and like I can't even, but like the whole "here's Johnny" thing was completely ad-libbed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically that entire scene was like almost ad-lib because I can be wrong, so feel free to correct me, but like they had originally planned to have a smaller or like styrofoam door. And then Jack Nicholson blew through it in 2 seconds because he's also actually a firefighter. So he actually was like, no, can we just have a wood door? I'll blow through that.
Yep, and he sure does. And the whole little pig, let me in.
That is so terrifying.
I feel like every choice that Jack Nicholson makes in this film is terrifying because it's like he thinks of every little thing that he can do, like the looks, the eyebrows, how his hair is, his like how he uses his voice. Everything is terrifying, and it's such a powerful performance, and it's one of the most memorable horror performances ever. And it's so interesting because it's like, and on the opposite end, you have Shelley Duvall, who I feel so bad for her with what she had to put up with making this movie. And like, I know like she won a Razzie originally for worst actress for this. And that's terrible because like she's like a raw nerve. By the end of this film, she is so emotionally devastated by the end of this film.
What she's doing perfectly. Like in a situation of emotional abuse like this, like she is reacting as a human being would.
Yep.
And that's what makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Is like you were just reacting like a human would react to this. And so she sells it.
Yeah. And her walking around the Overlook in the climax of the film, like I'm trying to remember what my first reaction was of her looking in that doorway into that hotel room and seeing a man in a dog suit.
Loving another man.
Yep. And you're just like,
okay.
What? And that camera push of it like zooming in on them, looking at the camera, just like, what? And then you have that is like, nice party. And just like the blood coming down the guy's head. And of course, the elevator. With just the sea of blood coming out, which is one of the most iconic shots in horror films. And it just captures the spirit of this movie so well.
Yeah.
And everything. So like, I think it's easy to go without saying, like every shot in every Kubrick movie is just perfect.
Yeah.
Like he wanted exactly what he wanted and he got them every shot.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really stood out were the static shots. So especially on Jack early, and you can see the way Jack devolves by the way the shots go. The more motion Jack has during each shot, you can tell more of his devolution, de-evolution, whatever you want to call it, into his madness. And it's really fascinating to watch because like early on, everything is static.
Yep.
And then the more and more he goes in, you see a lot more movement. And that tracks.
Yes. I love that shot where he's like super frustrated and he like the camera's pulling back and he's walking towards the camera just going like,
yeah,
and like flailing his arms out and like doing all those things walking towards the camera as he's trying to get a drink for the first time. Yeah. And like creepiest bartender ever.
Oh yeah.
Any movie. And Joe Turkel, who plays the bartender, was in Paths of Glory with Stanley Kubrick, and then was Tyrell from Blade Runner. And he's like, your money's not good here, Mr. Torrance. And that I remember that first shot of Jack sitting there, like looking at the camera, going like laughing, like he's talking to somebody. And when they turn that camera for the first time and that bartender's there, you're just like, okay, we're seeing things now. And you know what's really funny is, so at work, my suite that I work in is suite 237.
Oh, that's like, awkward.
And like watching The Shining and like room 237, boy, is I wish I could watch The Shining again for the first time. Like I wish that I could experience that for the first time, because I want to know what my reaction was when he walked in that room and sees that naked woman in the tub, her getting up all over him, and then all of a sudden him looking at the mirror and seeing her decomposed and she's old. And that is messed up. And just the decomposing body and her just walking towards the camera at you, it's just like Kubrick knew how to scare the living hell out of people.
Yeah. Also, my wife did, apparently, because as I was rewatching this for this video, my wife walked in and said, by the way, she's going to be dead by the time she gets out of that tub. I was like, oh, good to know.
And then it's like, nope. Oh my.
Yeah, I was like, I'm glad you watched this movie. She's like, no, I've never seen it before.
Well, good call. She has good instincts.
Yes.
But, and one thing I want to bring up too is like the steady cam.
Yes.
Because Kubrick really revolutionized that in this film.
Yeah.
And when Danny turns that corner, and it's the two twin girls, come play with us, Danny, and forever and ever. And it's just like, no, creepy kids, goodbye. And just the way that it's so disorienting, because supposedly if you try to fit all the scenes together, they don't work, because the actual structure of that hotel could not exist.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like if you run through the map, you would run into walls over and over again.
And boy, is that a detail that Kubrick knew would make things just that much more unnerving.
That was such a great piece of play.
And it's so interesting because it's such a bold choice, because like in an action film, if you don't keep consistency with the shots and the angles and the structure, it throws you off. It messes up the scene. But like having the whole structure of the hotel, your main setting, not making sense, and that just making like you feeling like you're lost in this strange maze of a place, and it makes it just so much better.
It makes you so unsettled throughout the entire experience. No matter what, like no matter what's happening, you are unsettled because you don't know where you are anymore. Exactly. And that is beautiful. And I hate it because it makes me terrified.
And it's I know one of the main things that I wanted to add on to is like, because the last shot of the movie, what's with that picture at the end of the film?
Give me your thoughts.
So, from what I understand, is Kubrick just put that in there to screw with people.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
There's no logic to it.
Yeah.
And like, I guess the best explanation you can get is like Jack had been fully consumed by the Overlook.
Right.
And there's obviously something supernatural going on. Because like, that's the thing. Because like, I've seen, like, I read the book too. And there's a lot stronger links to like, this is supernatural. Like, he's haunted and stuff like that. In the movie, Jack's straight crazy.
Yeah. But no, Jack loses his mind.
Yeah. But who's like, also, there might be ghosts. Because like that's the thing. Because like, I could see an argument almost that this was all his mental health.
Right.
The only thing that doesn't make sense, like really doesn't make sense, is how he got out of the food pantry.
Yeah, that's the biggest loss, is because there is such a jump there. And
because like you see
that's the hardest one to reconcile.
Yes, because you see him in there, and the next time you see him is chopping down the door with the axe. I'm like, how'd he get out?
Yeah. Was there an axe inside the food pantry?
I don't even think that you can axe your way out of that. That door is giant and metal. So like, I 100% argue like he was possessed in some shape or form, and also crazy. So
all the above.
We could have it both ways here. So, but like, and it's an interesting thing. And like, for all of you who've seen the film and haven't read the book, I do really recommend the book because it's a great book. And it gives you a very different experience. It isn't something like, oh, well, I could just watch the movie. It's the same thing, right?
No, I'm only halfway through the book, and I can already tell you that it is far different from the movie. And you get a lot more backstory, and there's a lot more to dive into.
Yep. And it's a much more human story.
Yeah.
Because the film is not. And I feel like most Kubrick films are not very human and relatable. They're cold and distant, but they're trying to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And it accomplishes it well.
Yeah. Now, I would say that the books themselves actually take more of a dive, like you said, in the humanistic side of like actually the addiction and the other aspects that follow with addiction.
Yeah.
In a really interesting way that is more realistic.
Exactly. And like, that's the thing too, because they don't play up his alcoholism a whole lot in the film.
No.
And
not nearly to what it is in the book based on what I've read.
And like, that's a big part of the book is his alcoholism. And like, the one thing, it's like him at the bar is like, I haven't had a drink and yada, yada, yada. And that's basically it. And I don't know about you. I don't know if I would want to be locked up in a hotel like that for months. Like,
I would probably need some type of liquor.
It's just like, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. One thing that I wanted to add. So I used to own the film on DVD, and like, it's the full regular cut. I bought a new Stanley Kubrick Blu-ray collection, and The Shining was in it. So I'm like, oh, I can get rid of my DVD. I popped this in for my Blu-ray in for the first time. It's the European cut of the film.
Oh, no.
And which is 1 hour and 59 minutes. And I'm like, interesting. They cut 25 minutes from the film. And I was a little worried because I'm like, is it going to feel incomplete?
It's all the over-the-top shots from helicopters.
Well, and what's interesting is it cuts out the doctor scene from the beginning of the film, which that's
kind of instrumental.
But you know what's interesting is have you seen the European cut?
No.
So I've seen the original enough times where I'm like, clearly something was missing here. But from a actual film perspective, I don't think anything was really missed.
Interesting.
And it was more efficient because it was 25 minutes shorter. They cut down as so many shots of Dick Halloran trying to get back there. Yeah. So like they don't cut back to him as many times, and like you don't really need it.
But like it wasn't all trimmed from the doctor scene though, right?
Like that whole doctor scene was cut out. So basically it was Danny having his episode, and like something's weird here.
But does that mean they don't address the abuse potentially?
There's still enough comments throughout the film.
They ducked around it. So it's still implied that it's happened.
Yeah, because like Jack still tells the story to the bartender of like,
okay,
I was just grabbing him to get him up off the floor.
I just didn't know if they like cut it completely out, because that would be a major game changer.
No, it's just the actual doctor scenes cut out.
Gotcha.
And then they trimmed out at least one part of Wendy going around the overlook at the end. They cut out the scene with all the skeletons, which it's like an extra scare that they cut out, but like they still have the furry in the dog suit. They still have the guy with like bleeding down his head, and they still have the elevator flooding out with blood. Right. So I'm like, it's kind of like, was it really missed? Not really. And it was interesting because I'm like, I was afraid going in because I love the film, and I'm like, honestly, this is a bit of a more efficient way of telling this story, and I didn't feel like anything was missing.
Gotcha.
Like that was really important. And also, this is somebody who's seen the original so many times. So like, I think it'd be interesting to hear what somebody who's never seen the film watch the European cut, because maybe it's a little bit different, because like obviously I've already internalized some of the things, but it's an interesting thought. But Matt, do you have any other thoughts on The Shining?
I think, man, I have so many thoughts on The Shining.
All the thoughts.
Yeah. I think it is a wonderful look, or not wonderful is a very, let's use it as a free range term.
Yeah.
Look at mental health and like how you deal with it, and with the ways that you can go down into depression and other things. So I think it's a great look at that. And I think there are a lot of allegories that are shown throughout the characters in that. And I could probably spend about 8 hours talking about that.
I'm sure we could.
Yeah. But I think specifically the characters of Wendy, Danny, and Jack are the main focus of that. And so you watch as Jack goes deeper down into his mental spiral as he's there at the hotel, and then you get to see, or you are allowed to see what that offset looks like to Danny and what Wendy does to try to offset it. And I think that is a really important part, because you see what it looks like in a relationship or a partnership where one person is spiraling and the other is trying to combat that, and what that can look like. I think that's extremely important.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's an interesting thing too, because there's so many things going on here in terms of relationships within this family.
Yeah.
And they really paint this whole situation in so many different ways. And like, obviously Jack is over the top in terms of how Jack Nicholson plays him. You know from the start something's not right here.
Right.
But the film does it in such a visceral, intense way that I don't think you can help but feel something very strongly watching this film.
Right. I mean, if you go back to his first interview scene, so when he's at the interview, you know he knows what's up. He knows his position, and he knows what he has to do, and he's going to pull those triggers to make that happen, regardless of what it costs. And then that just signifies like how much of a spiral he's willing to go down. And that part to me is fascinating because that is such a true thing.
And you see very quickly how toxic the family relationship is, because like Jack's like never warm to Danny,
right?
Like ever in this film. And the way he talks to Wendy is so cruel.
Yeah.
And like that's even before he goes completely gone.
Yeah.
It's like that one night where she comes in and he's like,
"This is my room."
Like, keep interrupting me. And he just saw that look on his face when he's going like,
yeah, when he just loses his crap and goes,
yeah. And it's so awful from the start, and you just feel so bad for Wendy and Danny in this situation, and it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, those would be my final thoughts. Is like, this is a great look at like how mental health can spiral and what it can look like for various parties involved.
Exactly. And if you don't do something to work on it and just keep letting it spiral, and that's this film, and then putting somebody in complete isolation, because I'm sure that helps. So
as much of an introvert as I am, I don't think that would help.
No.
Yeah.
All righty. Well,
not to preach on that topic of mental health, but I just think it's a great example of it.
It's really important because that's really at the heart of this, because like that's the thing. Jack's not all there and not all right. And it becomes very clear very quickly in this film.
Yeah.
But those are our thoughts on The Shining. So if
we shined all over it.
Yep. We had the shine tonight. I hope you all go check it out. If you haven't seen it before, hopefully you watched it before you listened to us talk about it.
Yeah, if you haven't, it's not my fault.
Yeah, yes. You
have 40 years almost.
What? It's because this came out in 80. It was 41 years ago.
Yeah, you had 41 years to go look at it.
So, and hopefully this inspired you to go check it out again if you haven't watched it in a while. But now we're going to wrap things up with the recommendation segment of the show. So, Matt, what's a film that you'd like to recommend to all the wonderful folks watching?
All right. So, for anybody who is also on the Ted Lasso wagon right now, which I think is most people, we all have to go back to our European football roots.
Mm-hmm.
But if we could go way back further, we can go to a darker time where Elijah Wood is part of a European football gang. So we're going to talk about Green Street Hooligans.
Interesting.
I first watched it back in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So very angsty me. I was like, oh yeah, violence, this is cool. Watching it again, I was like, man, these were a lot of bad decisions. But amazing movie, Elijah Wood, Charlie Hunnam, and they are both just acting their butts off throughout this. Absolutely amazing. presentation. Yeah, just going into the soccer theme, you're going to see a lot of football. You're going to see a lot of violence also. And it's basically a view of the inner structure of the gangs that support certain teams.
What's so interesting is, so I looked the film up right now. And so this is from director Lexi Alexander, who's a former world kickboxing champion.
Yep.
And also directed Punisher Warzone.
Yep.
So like, you know, this is going to be visceral and intense. And like having Elijah Wood and Charlie Hunnam, like I even see Rafe Spall on here too.
Yes. This is the most bizarre cast you will ever see for such a violent movie.
And it's very interesting idea. I'm going to add this to my watch list.
Yeah, it's definitely a good afternoon. I have nothing else to do. I'm going to drink a beer and I'm going to watch this. Yeah.
Has been added.
Don't throw too much weight into it, but there is a great sense of, it's about finding identity. And so for the Elijah Wood character, that's what he's on the search for. And that takes him overseas, and he learns a lot of things, a lot of hard ways. But he finds himself in that.
Interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah.
Now, I have two films I want to talk about. So one of them is a film from my watch list, and it was The Commitments. And this is a musical drama from director Alan Parker, who previously had made films like The Midnight Express and Mississippi Burning and Evita. And this is starring like a whole cast of very, very, very Irish people. And it's about an unemployed Dublin boy who decides he's going to put together a band that does soul music in Dublin.
A Dublin band that does soul music.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. Like, obviously, it hits on a lot of the cliches of like putting a band together kind of movie. But the cast is fantastic. I love the music in it. And it's a like really blue collar kind of story that really hits emotionally, and it's well directed. The cast is great. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed the film a lot, and I had watched this on Sunday, so I was a pretty big fan of it. So I definitely wanted to point it out to people.
Are there any names that we might recognize?
The only actor in the film that I recognized 100% was actually Maria Doyle Kennedy.
Okay.
Who's been in like she was in Dexter, Orphan Black, The Tudors. She was one of the voice actors in Wolfwalkers. She was in Sing Street. She was in
She was in Dexter. That's good enough for me.
Yeah. So like, and she was great too. She was one of the female singers in the band. And she had a pretty sizable role in it. And just, I don't recognize a whole lot of the rest of the cast, but like they all do great jobs. And like basically the biggest name I noticed was like Colm Meaney plays the main character's dad, who also has an obsession with Elvis, which was fun. Sure. So it's a very Irish movie, very music-based movie, but an enjoyable and emotional drama. And I really enjoyed the film. And then the newer film that I wanted to recommend was a documentary called The Truffle Hunters. And
I have heard of this, and I am very excited.
It's finally on VOD because like it started like rolling out in theaters like spring. And I'm like, when is this movie coming?
Yeah, I had a hard time going to the theater to see it, but I was like, I will absolutely take this as soon as I can get it at home.
Yep. So it is on VOD now. I rented it on Amazon, and it's deep in the forests of Piedmont, Italy. A handful of men, 70 or 80 years old, hunt for rare and expensive white Alba truffles. And basically, it's an extremely well shot, beautifully shot film of a bunch of old Italian men being old Italian men and playing with their dogs and hunting for truffles. So, like, this isn't like a game-changing documentary, but it's so beautifully shot, and the men in it are so enjoyable to watch, and all their dogs are really cute. And it was just a fun hour and 23 minutes to watch. And it was also very informative, and like it's like a nice like companion piece to Pig, also about truffle hunting.
Yeah.
So
I have watched Pig, so oh man.
Like,
you have to do a double feature.
Yes, because tonally nothing alike, but both about truffles. So
close enough for me.
Yeah. So have a truffle double feature and watch Pig and
Truffle
Truffle Hunters. So, but also, if you all out there haven't seen Pig yet, 100% go see Pig.
Watch Pig right now.
And if you only laugh at Nick Cage memes and don't appreciate him as an actor, well, you have another thing coming.
Go watch Con Air.
Put the bunny back in
the basket.
Put the bunny. Oh my God. Nick Cage can do so many things.
Anyway, sorry, I derailed.
Well, the funny thing is, like, there's at least 2 movies from this year that I would 100% recommend from Nick Cage. So, Pig and Willy's Wonderland, which, besides a really annoying subplot with a bunch of teenagers in it, is literally Nick Cage, who doesn't utter a single line in the film, taking on possessed animatronics at like a Chuck E. Cheese type place.
Wait, isn't there a game?
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yes, I was about to say this is exactly what I thought of. Five Nights at Freddy's was like,
It is 100% influenced by Five Nights at Freddy's.
God, there's gonna be such a lawsuit.
And then Nick Cage has another film coming out, The Prisoners of Ghostland, that looks insane. It's like this crazy martial arts samurai western with Nick Cage in it, and I'm just like sold. That
sounds like Cowboys versus Aliens.
Except this looks crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
Because like
I'm here for it.
Oh, they already have my money. Like, there you go.
Take it.
Take it. You could have told me Nick Cage and the name of the movie is Prisoners of Ghostland. I'm like, yeah. You don't even need to tell me what this movie is.
All you have to tell me is Con Air, and I will watch it 10,000 times over.
There you go.
I will pay for it in theater.
Yeah. But those are our recommendations, and that's the last segment of the show. So I hope all of you enjoyed the show. Matt, I really appreciated having you on.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was a joy.
Matt will be coming on to my other show, Lawson the Wasteland, soon. So keep an eye out for that. Yes. We'll get to know a little bit more about Matt and his perspective on movies. But tonight was mostly just The Shining, which was plenty to talk about. But thank you, Matt, again for coming on. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.